and welcome back to our channel, The Crumbs in the Philippines. Want to hope everybody had a happy new year and you're getting a good start into your New Year's resolutions. I know I have a couple. I'm going to try to keep them. Anyways, today we're going to talk about something that we get asked quite often here in the Philippines, because that we rent to own our property here. We've had a lot of questions, especially here recently, about what's involved in property ownership in the Philippines. What kind of options do foreigners have when it comes to that? So I spoke to the attorney that wrote up our contract that we used, and I also reached out and talked to two other real estate professionals who deal in selling and buying real estate here in the local area in Lipa, and they were pretty well versed on the laws here in the country. But of course they might not know everything, and I am no expert by any stretch of the imagination. So please do your research before you do this. And if you should find out something that I say is absolutely not true, or you have something that you could add, we'd really appreciate you adding it down in the comment section below. Okay, so I'm going to dive right into it. Just bear with me as I look down. I have a lot of notes here on my laptop because this was a lot of information and a lot of legal stuff. So without any further ado, the Philippines has a very, very strict laws regarding the ownership of property by foreign nationals. It's almost impossible to do. It says, as a general rule, foreigners are not allowed to acquire or own real estate and land. But there are some exceptions to this rule, okay? You can acquire real estate, a home or property, through hereditary succession, which means if you're into a contract for property ownership with your Filipino spouse and they pass away and you're named in the will as the successor to gain the property, then there are some circumstances where you can acquire that real estate and actually be the owner. But even in this case, that's actually pretty rare, and we'll get into that a little bit farther down as we go. Foreign spouses of Filipino citizens may acquire property via a last will and testament of the Filipino spouse or Filipino spouse if the spouse has no legitimate hereditary successors, which are parents, siblings, other relatives. Legally, relatives can step in and claim ownership should the spouse die. And I wouldn't want to go to court with a Filipino here in the Philippines. Your chances of winning are pretty slim. Okay, if you're involved in a business or you want to invest in a business, you are allowed to purchase ownership in said business if it is registered legally in the Philippines and you have a co-owner who is a Philippine citizen, and they must own 60% share in the company. In other words, as a foreign national, you're only allowed a 40% stake in the company. That's just the rule here. That's the law. Okay? And if you're purchased by a foreign citizen who was a natural-born Filipino, you are allowed to purchase land legally in the Philippines, even though you're not a Philippine citizen. That doesn't really apply to a lot of our viewers. I'm not going to go into that because there's actually a lot of restrictions and requirements for that category. And for the purpose of this video, it's just not relevant, okay? But if you were born in the Philippines and you took citizenship in another country and gave up your Philippine citizenship, you could still come back here and own property in the Philippines as a natural-born Filipino. One of the things that was stressed was that SRRV visa holders are not allowed to own property in the Philippines. That's kind of a common misconception, is that people that are on that special retirement visa are allowed to own property. But it specifically says, and I read that section, the attorney showed it to me in his little booklet, that says that they fall under the same rules as any other foreign expat here in the Philippines. Okay. Now let's talk about some specific cases. Okay. Condominium ownership. Foreign expats are allowed to purchase and own and retain ownership, as in have your name on the title of a condominium, as long as 60% of the units in the condominium complex are owned by Filipino citizens. That falls into the previous 60-40 rule. So as long as you're not the new owner that's going to put the building ownership at 41% foreign owned, you'd be good in said investment. And I don't think there's many condos in the Philippines that have more than 40% ownership by foreigners anyway. So you'd probably be in good shape. And condominium ownership might be just what some people are interested in doing. They have a lot of amenities like security, parking, swimming pools, gyms and spas and things like that. But it just wasn't something I was interested in. We stayed in a lot of condominiums through Airbnb, some really nice ones also. But it has that feeling of living in a motel room or a really small apartment. It wasn't something that I was interested in doing, so we kind of passed on the condo option. Okay, now let's talk about rent to own, which Jen and I are doing, okay? Foreigners are allowed to enter into rent to own contracts as long as they are married to a Filipino citizen, and the foreigner's name is allowed to be on the sales contract along with the Filipino citizen. But whenever the payment plan or mortgage, whatever you want to call it, is completed, the foreigner's name is not allowed to be listed on the title of the property. That right belongs to the Filipino citizen's spouse. Okay, and the Filipino citizen spouse also retains the right to all transactions regarding the said property. As in, if you want to sell the property, that has to be completely within the consent of the Filipino citizen. If you want to take a second mortgage, use it as collateral on a loan, anything like that, that all has to be done with the consent and signature of the owner. And that is the Filipino spouse that's on the contract. And if the Filipino spouse passes away and passes the property along to their foreign spouse, which that's probably not a good idea in the first place, because the foreign spouse has very few options, okay? Because you refer back to an earlier clause in the law which says that foreign nationals cannot own that property to begin with, but they do give you a little bit of leeway. And here is where I ran into just a couple of differences between what the attorney said and what the real estate folks said. The attorney said you have a reasonable amount of time, and that was defined as 4 to 6 months to dispose of the property by sale as the foreign national. You could actually sell the property in this case if your Filipino spouse passes away, and you get to keep the proceeds from the sale. Or you have some other options. You can pass the property along to your Filipino spouse's children, parents, or other relatives, and then it becomes theirs. And should you try to fight them in court over the ownership of the property, as I mentioned earlier, you're probably going to end up losing, and you'll end up paying all the court costs as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's really hard to buy real estate as any type of a personal investment for you yourself here in the Philippines. Not something that I would recommend doing, okay? So I'm gonna, now I'll tell you what my reason was for renting to own, okay? I know that Jen and I, we just celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary. And I usually, and as a rule of thumb, expats are generally quite a bit older than their Filipina spouses. I mean, and sometimes it's as much as 30, 35, 40 years in age gap. I know for Jen and I, it's just a little over 10 years, but it's still there. And the percentages are that the expat is going to end up checking out before their spouse does. And we don't really have a whole lot of options as far as leaving behind a way for our spouse to take care of themselves should we no longer be there to provide. It's really, really difficult to set up your spouse to receive any pensions or Social Security after you pass away, unless you meet a lot of requirements. And I mean, it can be done. Don't get me wrong, it can be done. But that's one of the reasons why we pay into the Philippine Social Security system for Jen, because I'm doing research on Social Security to see about whether or not we could get her set up to receive it after I'm gone. But the truth is, I'm pretty sure there's a residency requirement for the spouse where they have to have lived in the U.S. for 5 years consecutively at some point. That's not something that that's in our near future. We're not planning on going back to the USA for any extended period of time. This is our home, and it's my home now. So with that in mind, knowing how hard it was, one of the things that I thought I could do would be we could make a home purchase, and as the title would be in Jen's name, and somewhere in the future, if she wanted to rent this out to someone or sell it, then she would have something viable that she could use to sustain her and her family for the rest of their lives. Because I mean, the value of the home goes up over time, and it in Philippine standards, it's worth quite a lot of money in pesos. It would be enough for 20, 25 years for a Filipino family to live on here in the Philippines. But that was my thinking. And I knew that even if I was a rental, I'm going to be paying monthly for housing regardless, okay? And so my thinking was, I'll just pay a little bit more and the initial term of our contract was 5 years, and we're well into that already, and we pay more than the minimum payment already on this thing to cut it down even more by time, is that eventually we'd end up with a rent-free place to live as long as I was here. And it's no different than if we had paid rent all the time and really had nothing to show for it at the end of the road. And whenever it's my turn to go, and if Jen succeeds me in life, then that would leave her behind something that she could hold on to, and it's kind of a security blanket to go along with her Social Security, which is not really adequate for all of the necessities of life per se here in the Philippines. But anyway, that's the way that I looked at it. And I mean, everybody's different. There's a lot of people that tell me I'm stupid for doing that, and I'm an idiot, and you can't own property. And I mean, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to buy this as an investment. And I have my savings, I have my investments and things like that'll carry on until the end of my life. And I just wanted to make sure that I left something behind for Jen and her family. And that's the whole purpose that we bought this house anyway. And I can already see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is awesome. And we're going to get to a point where we have no housing payment, and we're just going to be a couple of vacation hound dogs where we spend half the year not in our house here. We're going to be out and about just having a good time. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We super appreciate it as always. If you're new to the channel and you haven't already, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. We really appreciate it. And The bigger our community is, the more we can share with each other and learn and help each other out as we reach that retirement age and make some tough decisions and things like that. But anyway, we got a lot of videos planned, and we'll try to do at least one a week, and hopefully we'll get to 2 a week. But my favorite are the travel videos, and we're starting to get near we got about another month of this dreary, cooler weather where it's kind of overcast a lot, and then we're going to get out and hit it again on heading to the beach and to the lakes and waterfalls and whatnot. Anyway, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Stay healthy, stay happy. We'll see you next time.